In this chapter, we are going to cover the muscles of the back in more depth. So we are starting off with the trapezius. The trapezius is this giant muscle here on the back. The way you can simplify the trapezius is almost like if somebody's wearing a scarf on their back, like they're wearing like just a giant scarf that's way too big, and it just looks like this on their back. And this is like a pretty nice way of looking at it. Of course, you have to cut away some stuff here, but then you would imagine the gravity is going to do a little bit of thing here and just make this conform to the neck. So essentially, it's just a diamond shape like so, and then in the middle there's also another diamond shape like so. So it's essentially just two diamond shapes, and this is how you can simplify it down. When we are getting more granular into this, it's really important to talk about the specific elements that make up the trapezius. Most people, when they talk about the trapezius, they only talk about it from the back, that yes, it does have this diamond shape, and that is really important. But what's very often neglected is the fact that this actually connects to the front. So we have some attachment marks that we have to talk about. I'm just going to move this like so, and then you can do this in ZBrush just with Shift and S. You can just snapshot this down like so. So it goes from a little notch here in the skull on both sides, and it goes from this point and it goes down the neck, and this actually connects to the clavicles. This is really important. You can see how many things connect to the clavicles. So far we talked about the pectoralis. You're going to see that we have deltoid as well, and very much so the trapezius. Here's a little cool thing about the trapezius as well, that this connects almost at the same point as the deltoid. I know we haven't spoken about the deltoid yet, but essentially you can draw one line that just goes through this whole thing. This creates more harmony in the body. So this goes from up here and it goes down like so. If I just pick the right color, it just goes down like so. And this connects to the clavicle like so. Then we have the second part that goes from, if I just isolate this muscle now, so this is the only one we can see. This goes from actually the acromion process, and this goes all the way in towards the spine like so. And then the third part goes from the spine of the scapula. This is the shape you can see here, the one we've been talking about before. But this is such an important landmark for basically for the whole upper body, because this is also where the clavicles attach here as well. But this attaches to the spine of the scapula. And then this goes all the way down, actually goes over the scapula to some degree, and it goes all the way down, and it attaches to the vertebra. The vertebra is, of course, just one of the elements of the spine. It attaches off the last vertebra connecting the ribs. You can see here we have like some floating ribs, and this goes all the way down like so. And the way you can simplify this down in this case is you get a point here, and you just make sure these fibers are going down like so. So this is a really simple way of simplifying down or creating the trapezius, where we're starting off from the neck, and the fibers are just flowing down like so into the clavicles. We have one part going from the acromion over like so, and then we have the last part just following the basically just drawing a circle at the spine of the scapula and just making this go all the way down, and it goes to the same level as the rib cage, so the bottom part of the rib cage. What we haven't spoken about yet is the fact that muscle doesn't really connect to bone. In this case, it looks like it connects to bone, but actually how it connects to bone is through something called tenon. So it always connects to tenon that then connects to the bone. In some cases, this is not relevant whatsoever because the tenon is so small and basically just connects directly to the bone. But in some cases, we have a lot of tenon that is that's really important to keep in mind, because it really affects the surface. One of them is going to be for the tricep, for instance, and another one is going to be very much for the traps, the trapezius. Because in this case, what you can see is, if you were to look at like real world people here, this is something you can see that this all connects to like more of a common tenon instead of just connecting straight to the bone. So this area here is not really going to be affected by muscle. So this area here is going to be mostly flat, almost regardless of how well built you are. You really can't make tendon expand or contract. You can't really make the tendons bigger. While the muscle here, you very much can. So for instance, if you are a crazy large bodybuilder or some kind of creature, you can very much expand the muscle here. If you just were to like pump this stuff up all the time, you would just get a bigger trap. This part would just become massive, but this part here would remain static. And what's important here as well is that we have a landmark. We have the 3 curves of the spine. Remember, we have this curve, we have this curve, we have this curve. And at this point here, we have the different vertebra. And at this point here, we have the 7th vertebra of this part. This is called the 7th cervical vertebra. And you don't really have to remember the specifics of like the naming and such, but the point is just at this area, there is going to be a vertebra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And it's going to be around here. So this is just an area you're going to see, and you're just going to see a vertebra. Sometimes you can see the additional vertebra as well. But this is just really important. At this point, there's an area of tendon that's not going to be affected by the muscle. And that's it for the trapezius or the traps. Use whatever term you prefer. Everyone is going to understand you if you say traps instead of trapezius, but entirely up to you. The next muscle is the lats or the latissimus dorsi, and this is again one of these massive muscles similar to the traps. If we were to simplify this muscle down, you can see that this is essentially just a triangle. If you just draw from like a point from up here to down here and then down here, we basically just have a triangular shape. And that's a really useful shape just to remember, because this here is in a large part just a triangle like so. So now we've drawn a little triangle here. What on earth is happening with this region right here? Clearly there's stuff happening. And like with the trapezius going up here, we have a tendinous sheet here. And this is really important to keep in mind because this area does not expand or contract. This is just like, you can think about this almost as like a leather belt, where this is just there to connect the muscle to the bone. So this triangle we have here, this is going to be the actual muscle that we are seeing. So in terms of the structure of the lats, it's going to go from the spine right here. It's going to go over and follow the iliac crest all the way up to around this point here, and then the muscle is going to actually start, the muscle part of the muscle, and it goes all the way up to quite a high point on the humerus. Remember, the humerus is just the bone in the upper arm like so. And then you just draw a little triangle between these shapes. It's really important to note that this actually covers the bottom part of the scapula as well. A common mistake is to either make this too low like so, or it is to just not cover this part as well. You can see this is usually quite a thin muscle, but on bodybuilders, this becomes quite a large and almost a grotesque shape. So keep that in mind whenever you're sculpting or drawing the latissimus dorsi, that it's normally not like an insanely massive shape. But something to keep in mind is that you can see this often from the front if the person is well developed. So that's really it for the latissimus dorsi. To simplify it down, you draw a little triangle like so. It follows the ridge here of the hips. It attaches to the spine, and it's just a nice little triangle like so. Something to keep in mind as well with this is that in terms of where it inserts up in the arm, it goes between the bicep and the tricep. So you can see here we have the tricep. We haven't spoken about these muscles yet, but I just think it's important just to talk about this, that it goes actually between these two muscles. If we just were to do the bicep and tricep and such, and these are the only thing that's visible, it's going to go between these two. So this is a pretty nice way to figure out exactly where this is going to and from. A common mistake here as well is to insert this just in the wrong spot. Like you might be just merging with the bicep or the tricep, but it just goes between these two muscles. And then we have the spinal erectors. The spinal erectors is this series of muscles that goes from the hips here, and it just basically just forms a tube like so that just goes up towards the spine, and you can see this shape like so. The way you simplify the spinal erectors is essentially into a sausage. You just put a sausage along the spine and you just leave it there. And the important part about it is that you have two of them. So this is a shape that you will see really often in people. Two sausages along the back. And it goes from the triangular part here of the hips. The next muscle is the infraspinatus, and that is this big muscle that we're seeing on the scapula, like so. This is a muscle that really takes up the majority of the scapula, and it goes all the way to the top of the humerus here, like you can see in our 3D model. Though with this muscle, you aren't actually seeing this having a crazy amount of volume. Usually this muscle is more just a sheet covering the actual shoulder blade, the actual scapula. So while this is important to get into the form if you're sculpting or drawing, it's not crazy important to really think about this when it comes to the anatomy. It's more just a form that's there. And relating to this one, we have two muscles. We have the teres major, which is here. Then we have the teres minor, that is right here. And the muscle that we really care about in this case is going to be the teres major. The teres minor is just here. We were just including this to mention that it exists, but we're really not going to be talking more about it than that. In nearly every case, the muscle that we're going to be talking more about, or the muscle that we're going to be seeing in a sculpt, is going to be the teres major. So the teres major is a really underappreciated muscle, and as you can see, it goes from the just the bottom part of the scapula here up to the humerus. So teres major and teres minor, they usually come in pairs like so. The way you usually would see this in the scapula or in a practical example like this would be that you have just the scapula like so, you have the spine of the scapula, and then you essentially just have two shapes which are important. The first one is going to be just the infraspinatus, and then we have the teres major, which you can see goes underneath the tricep as well. That's really important. So then we have the teres major like so. So essentially it just forms this shape like so. Usually this would also be like combined into one shape. So it's just two main shapes of the scapula. You have the infraspinatus and you have the teres major. And just talking a little bit about names as well. Here we do have the infraspinatus, and while this is not a particularly important muscle, the way you can remember it is pretty simple. It's infra, which just means below. So that's like infrared. And spinatus is just this part, just the spine. So this is just the spine of the scapula. So infraspinatus just means below the spine. And if you have a below the spine, if you have an infra, you're going to have a superior as well, or in this case, a supra. So we have this guy here, which is supraspinatus. We're not going to be talking about this guy because this is more than just what I did, because this is just not really that relevant to surface form. But this is all just to demystify the naming just a little bit. If you have an infra, you're going to have a supra, and if you have a supra, you're going to have an infra, and just to help you remember some of these names. And then we have the rhomboids. The rhomboid is a muscle that you are going to see in some cases, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be something that just contributes to the overall volume. This is kind of a simple muscle, to be honest, in terms of remembering it, because what you do, you just essentially draw a line here at the, again, this is the medial border of the scapula, and you just draw it diagonally up like so, and then it doesn't matter exactly from a practical point of view, of course, where this muscle specifically goes. It's basically just a shape that goes like so. And when I say it doesn't really matter, obviously if you're a physiotherapist or something, or like a doctor, this kind of stuff matters a lot. But we're not saving lives. We can afford to keep this stuff simple. The reason I keep this stuff so simple is because you can easily remember a shape like this. But if I just were to go, well, if I were to talk about the exact anatomical terms of this, it just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like you're talking about a different language because it's so weird and specific. So that's all we're going to talk about when it comes to the rhomboids. It's a nice, simple muscle in a rhomboid shape. And then we have a muscle that I find that most people don't really talk about, and that's this muscle here. We have the serratus, that is this guy here. Remember, it goes from the medial border again, and it just goes out here. This is its brother. This was the serratus anterior. This is the serratus posterior. Technically, serratus posterior inferior, meaning it's just below something. There's another one up here, which is not relevant. But basically, this muscle here is something you would see just occasionally. So what you would see sometimes is that you have the shape of the spinal erectors, but then you have this like ballooning shape, like so. And this would be the serratus posterior, basically just a cousin of the serratus anterior. So not something that you're going to see a crazy amount, but just if you do see this like ballooning shape, this could be a hint that this would be that shape. And that's it for the back muscles. Just to sum this up in an easy to understand manner, we have the trapezius that goes from the back of the head, connects to the clavicles, really important. You can continue this down into the deltoid, goes here, goes into the acromion process, and then just creates this like diamond shape on the back. Just this nice little diamond shape pattern, like so. We have the latissimus dorsi that goes up here between the bicep and tricep, and essentially just creates this nice little triangular shape like so. Remember, there's a big tenon right here. Then we have the rhomboids that goes from the medial border of the scapula and just goes up like so, like a rhomboid shape. Then we have the infraspinatus going right here. Doesn't really contribute to a whole lot of surface variation. It's just this flat sheet. And then we have the teres major that goes right here as well. And you can simplify this usually into like two main shapes, which would be like a balloon here and a balloon here, like so. And just remember that these both do attach to the scapula. Then we have the spinal erectors going from down here, and you make two little sausages, just going up like so. And then we have the serratus posterior here, just creating some kind of surface variation, essentially another sausage that you might see sometimes right here. And that's it for the muscles in the back.